For the sake of my sanity, I sewed a journal sleeve. I was already not in a good place a couple of days ago. Take your meds, kids. And then I stumbled on a video that fully broke me, and I spent 20 to 30 minutes sobbing in a pit of despair before deciding that I was going to fix it with sewing. Yeah, I know. But hear me out. First off, it's okay if you feel like shit. Feeling that way sucks, but it's allowed. Feeling your feelings is important, but it's also okay if you don't want to stay there. I didn't want to stay there, I didn't want to wallow in my feelings, but I wasn't coming out of them naturally, so active steps were required. I decided I was going to make something for myself. Most of what I make is for myself in some way because I love making things, but in this instance, I wanted to make something that I was going to keep. And I wanted a journal sleeve, which is basically a book sleeve with extra steps. I do have a book sleeve that I bought secondhand on Vinted, and the fabric is really pretty, but I don't love the way it feels. I don't know if it's a synthetic fibre or just coated in something synthetic, but it's not that nice to the touch. Also, it has a zip, which I don't really need. The point of having a case for my journal was to protect it. My current one is battered as hell. And to corral my pens without having to carry a pencil case as well, not to add extra steps to accessing my journal. So I pulled out some spooky fabrics that I love and that I've not used because I wasn't sure what I was going to make with them that would be special enough to justify using them, which might just be perfectionism in a different hat. But because I was doing this to make myself feel better, I did some other stuff first. I messaged the group chat to see if anyone was available to play video games later because I knew I needed company at some point. I lit a scented candle that I knew had a soft, calming scent that I really like. I dug out my sticker book and put some cute stickers on my sewing machine because both of my machines are tragically lacking in whimsy. I gave our cat a treat stick because seeing her happy makes me happy, and I got myself a sweet drink for flavour and energy and some cordial for hydration. I searched for good news videos to put on in the background, and I set up my camera because I could already tell I was going to want to talk about this later. I'm a verbal thinker and a yapper. Wanting to talk about it later was basically inevitable. I knew I was going to struggle to focus on what I was doing because, although just getting set up had started the process of settling my feelings a little, I was still pretty distressed, and I knew from experience that that absolutely destroys my ability to concentrate. That meant I was going to make mistakes, but this was about being kind to myself, so I decided to set my mentality going into the project to something that wasn't going to have the complete opposite effect. Soft focus, roll with mistakes, and if all else fails, I'd have made progress towards something that could be fine-tuned later. And I got started. My focus did wander. It actually took me a few hours to finish the project because I kept getting distracted. Sometimes by my own less than pleasant thoughts, and sometimes by the videos I had in the background. Sometimes it was just that I was tired because of the crying jag, but still too wide to sleep, and needed a break from even the soft focus I was trying to maintain. And I did make mistakes. My thread broke partway through one section and I meant to restart at the other end of the seam and meet the interrupted part from the other side, but I started at the wrong side of the project and had to stop and start a couple of times to get where I needed to be. I forgot to cut the fabric for the pocket at the start and had to stop and do it partway through the sewing process. My quilting lines weren't terribly straight, even though I'd used a quilting guide, and it's a couple of centimetres shorter than is ideal because I let myself not worry too much about dimensions because that's a working memory task that requires ratcheting my attention way tighter than I had the energy for right then. I'm still not great at rolling the top edge evenly enough that it looks uniform before I top stitch it, and I completely forgot that I'd intended to add a pen loop to the side seam. And it was fine. Good, even. I let myself take however long it took, and I let myself make and fix mistakes, and I let myself just exist doing what I was doing without the expectation of perfection or the idea that I had to be creating something of value. By the end, I was still a little emotionally tender and kind of exhausted, but also still too wide to sleep. But I felt better, calmer, less hopeless, more like I could ride the waves of my feelings and less like I'd drown under them. And I had a journal cover that isn't perfect, but that I'm so incredibly proud of. Not just because it came out way better than it had any right to, given my mental state at the time, but because I'd taken active steps to care for myself, to make myself feel better, and to do it without beating myself up for how I should feel or how quickly I should have bounced back. For me, someone whose emotions sometimes feel like they're cranked up to 11, who for most of their life had no emotional regulation skills whatsoever, and who's been known to think themselves into a spiral that renders them non-functional for more than a week at a time, that's huge. That's fucking life-changing. So if you're still here, let this be your reminder that you're allowed to struggle, but you're also allowed to care for yourself. And you're allowed to be proud of yourself for trying and for coming out the other side. Also, look, the pocket's reversible.